All right, so next question is going to be on the officer side, but I'm going to answer it as an NCO, and then we'll hand it over to you, and you can kind of give your take on it.
Okay.
So, what additional traits and attributes does someone need to be successful as an SF officer compared to an enlisted SF soldier? The majority of information out there applies to being an enlisted soldier and the traits that they need to possess. I was wondering if there was anything additional besides solid leadership skills that one needs to be aware of in order to be successful at SFAS and beyond. All right, so I have had at least probably 4 or 5 team leaders that I can kind of base this information off, or base my perspective off. But number one, and this is not just for officers, this is basically for everyone, because honestly, there's tons of overlap, like very, very small differences in the minutia, but for the most part, there's a lot of overlap between enlisted and officer. But lead yourself first. Be able to lead yourself first. If you're asking someone or assigning someone a task to do, and you would be either unwilling to do it, you've never done it yourself, you would be unable to do it, or anything along those lines, how are you supposed to sleep at night and actually be like, okay, I'm confident in myself that, I could do that kind of stuff, but I'm asking someone else to do this? Be able to, or actually be willing to help people out and put yourself in situations that maybe officers wouldn't usually be put in, but your guys, when they see you doing this stuff, or at least see your willingness, sometimes they might be like, sir, go ahead, whatever, we got this. But at least see your willingness to do that. That is huge. So you have to lead yourself. You have to hold yourself accountable to things. You can't lie to yourself. You can't be doing all these things outside the team room that kind of just smash your self-esteem and smash your confidence, like little things like pressing snooze in the morning or making a commitment to go do something, even if no one else knows about it. And then, time comes around, I'm not going to do it. You have to be a leader of yourself first. Next one I would say is listen. And I don't just mean listen and like, wait your turn to talk. Listen to what your guys are saying and actually take that to heart and maybe ask follow-up questions like based on what your guys are suggesting or requesting. The guys, when you show up, especially the guys on the team, for the most part, depending on how senior the team is, a lot of those guys are going to have been there for quite a while. They know the situation. They know what's going on. They know what they've done in the past that works well, that doesn't work well. They know the dynamic. You as the officer showing up, you don't know that yet. You know how to do officer things and lead, and you are the face of the team. But when you first show up, just because you're the guy in charge, you're the team leader, that doesn't necessarily mean like you go in and revamp a bunch of stuff. You listen to what the guys are doing. Of course, sometimes in some situations, a team might need to be rebuilt kind of from the ground up. But in other situations, especially if you know you're going to a really solid team, you probably don't need to step in and really change much, if anything. So definitely be an active listener, ask follow-up questions. Don't be afraid to, if you don't know how to do something like you were saying earlier, don't be afraid to admit it and kind of get some advice or figure it out yourself. So that's another huge one. Don't try and reinvent the wheel, kind of along the lines of what the last one was. A lot of guys, I wouldn't say a lot, but in my experience, I've had one officer that kind of showed up and tried to just change a bunch of stuff about a team that was already really doing good things and being successful. They tried to kind of change stuff like, hey, I'm the guy in charge now. We're going to do this instead, or we're going to do this instead. Of course, if you show up and your team is doing something that is, immoral or illegal or against the rules, of course, there's like a little gray area there. But if it's like pretty clear, yeah, you might want to step in and do something like that. But for the most part, if the team is a well-oiled machine, then the team's a well-oiled machine, whether you're there or not. Of course, you have to be the face of the team, but don't try and go in and, start implementing a bunch of things that, make you feel important, but aren't necessarily beneficial to the team. And the last thing I'll say is be the face of the team. So take your role as the face of the team very seriously. So the team sergeant is basically in charge of the operations, and he is the guy who's been around the longest. He's got the most experience. He's in charge of making sure his guys do what they're required to do and what they're expected to do. The officer still has to be the guy who takes responsibility and takes ownership of good things, bad things. There's a little bit of something that I kind of think is important here with the ownership thing. When the team messes up, take ownership of it. Even if it was not your fault, you're still responsible for it. And when you try to like spread the blame out or give it to someone else, you're the guy in charge. So ultimately, you are the guy who is responsible for whatever happened. When good things happen, however, absolutely you can take credit for it. You can absolutely be a part of the success, but also know that these good things probably happen because of multiple other guys doing what they should have been doing on the team. So even if it's like, hey, congratulations, sir, well done on X mission or X training event, give your other guys some credit and don't try and take that credit. And then also, some guys get really upset when I kind of mention this, but as the face of the team, you are going to be the outward-facing individual that higher leadership is going to communicate with and see. You're going to have to brief people. You're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have hard conversations. You're going to get asked difficult questions. Make sure you're someone who actually looks like a Green Beret. You don't have to look like an absolute freaking monster. You don't have to look like a men's fitness cover model or anything along those lines. But I always say, if you can't tell where your neck starts and your chin ends, it's just a straight line. You got jowls or whatever. Or if you can't wear a combat shirt because your belly's kind of hanging down over your belt, you're not really setting a very good first impression. And I don't care what anyone says. Don't judge a book by their cover, whatever. I think that's a Fantasyland quote. People will judge you. And if you show up and you just don't look like you should be a Green Beret or even in the military or whatever it is, you're going to always have to come from behind at some point. That's just how it works. That's how life actually works. So hold yourself accountable to staying fit. Make sure that you are always the person that it can confidently speak for the team and take ownership for the negatives. And if you suck at these things too, like some officers aren't very good at briefing, they're not very good at speaking. There's ways that you can go out and put yourself in situations where you can get better. There's this thing called Toastmasters that absolutely, I think, honestly, unless you're just a natural speaker, any officer could consider going to Toastmasters and actually getting those repetitions and building that confidence, because sometimes you're going to have to talk to very, very high up people that usually in most situations a captain would never have to talk to, like a 2-star or 3-star, whatever it is. And if you can't show up to that confidently and composed and able to actually get the information out because you're super nervous or you just don't know what you're doing, you haven't prepared enough, then that's not going to make the team look very good. So I would say those are probably some of the bigger ones. Of course, there's a lot more, but from the NCO side, that's what I would kind of start with focusing on.
Yeah, that mirrors my experience. I was very fortunate. When I showed up, I've always had great NCOs. All my platoon sergeants were phenomenal. They really took that teach, coach, and mentor role very serious. Like they said, this is my lieutenant, and he is my responsibility, and I owe it to him and to the guys to train him. So I've always been really well coached and mentored, and that is especially true when I showed up to my ODA. My team sergeant, who'd been a team sergeant for already 2 years at that point, sat me down on day one and was like, "Captain, this is what we expect of you," and he just laid it out. And a couple things that he laid out, and that they were apparent to me before that, but to hear it, like, this is your contract with us. Number one, fitness is a non-negotiable. His tour of duty before he came to the team was he was the lead instructor down at Key West at CDQC. So fitness was non-negotiable. You're going to be a yoked up badass. So every day was a full blown fucking monster. And we didn't know shit about fitness back then. It was just harder is better. So every day was a beast. So fitness is non-negotiable. Number two, loyalty goes both ways. We expect you to be loyal to us, and if you are, we will be loyal to you. You are to your point, you are our representative outside of this team room. When you go up and talk to the head shed, you are representing us. When you go see the battalion commander, you're representing us. When we go down range, you are going to be briefing an admiral or an ambassador who is a 4-star assimilated rank. You're going to be briefing senior host nation officials. You are not authorized to fuck that up. Our credibility, our freedom of maneuver is dependent on you not being an idiot. So you gotta get your shit together. You gotta be highly competent, very confident, humble, well presented. You can't be a fat ass. Your uniform's always got to look good. You have to speak well. You can't say fuck every other word. You got to have your shit together. So that was those were laid out to me very clearly. And the other thing, and then from the boys, the expectation was, is we expect you to do everything that we do, but better. So we're going to cross train. Hey, Captain, come here. Let me show you how to do this IV on the foot. And okay, you did it one time. Now let's flick off the lights, and here's the set of nods. And you better get it on the first stick. And I'm like, hey man, but you didn't get it. He's like, doesn't matter what he did. This is what we expect of you. It's like, boom, go. We're going to go to the shoot house, and Captain, you better be hitting the X-ring on every shot. Cold bore, 25-meter X-ring. You better be hitting every one. Hey, we're doing calc and place a demo. You better build the perfect booger charge. And, so take that out. Hey, my Echo would not set up the radio for me. He showed me one time, and the expectation was, Captain, set it up. Let's go. If you got to make your own, you got to understand, wavelength propagation, because you got to build your own antennas when we're out in the woods. Go. So that was the expectation for everything. We go to the dojo, and we're rolling. You better accept every challenge. If another team, God help you, if another team rolls into this dojo and you don't tap out their commander. So like that's the expectation. So the expectation from the boys was, you're going to do everything we do to the absolute highest degree. So you got to be willing to come in and work. So you spend a day. You go to the range for a day, you got to be out there planking. You got to be practicing. You got to be doing all the drills. You got to be shooting. You got to be doing all that stuff for repetition. We would go to the range so much that I would get muscle failure in my trigger finger. I mean, it was like, man, we're going to shoot. And then you get down the range and the boys go home. Guess where you at? You're at the desk. You're doing risk assessments for tomorrow's training. Admin, and you're doing it all because that's the expectation. Because the boys aren't doing that. That's not their job. Your job is to do that, and then you got to go up and you got to brief the group commander, because we got a J set coming up, and he needs to know what the training plan is. So you got to go do that. So the reality is, and my team sergeant told me this: you're only here for 2 years. You better be busting your ass. Your job, Captain, is to force this team to perform. You're pushing innovation. You're pushing the next good idea. You're setting the pace, because you're only here for 2 years. And our job as the NCOs on the team is to slow you down. And if we don't do our job and you don't do your job, we'll be like that team down the hall that nobody wants to be on. So your job is to push, our job is to pull, and we will meet in the middle with a high performing, super badass team. That is the only acceptable answer. And it was like, okay, then that's what we're doing. And that held through my entire time on the team. And God help you, if you showed up and you didn't perform, if you were doing sprints and a guy beat you on sprints, you're going to hear about it the rest of the day. If you went to the range and you didn't outshoot everybody, well, you better get your wallet out, because that's a case of beer, brother. So it was like, that's the expectation. And so you got to be an expert on all those things. And if you are willing to put forth that honest effort, you will be shown the good grace of guys helping you out. A good, senior medic will make certain that you are squared away. He will make certain that he teach girls. I mean, my medic let me do. We do live tissue training, and I'm over here doing chest tubes on goats. Like that's not something that I should be expected to be able to do. But he's like, I'm going to give you those opportunities because you're willing to outwork. And so my expectation has always been those things that I just laid out, and I have carried that through to every position that I've had. I've never had to no one has ever waited on me. I've never been late, never been last, and I've never been light, because it was never acceptable. And so I don't accept that. I don't accept that of the junior officers working for me. I don't expect my non-commissioned officers to have to deal with that on an ODA. If that captain's not performing, he's gone. He's out of there. And I've seen guys. There was a team across the hall from me, and this captain I have some history with him. He was a dirtbag, and we were doing helo casting, and you jump out of the helicopter over the water, and then you crawl up the caving ladder, get back in, and do it again. And this fat ass, fitness is a non-negotiable. He was struggling to climb up the ladder, and it's difficult. It's a challenge. You got the rotor wash. You're wet. You're fatigued. He couldn't climb up the ladder, and he said it was a shoulder injury. I can't do it because I got this old high school shoulder injury, and it got to the point where the helicopter had to do extra turns, waiting for this guy to climb his fat, lazy ass up into the bird. And I remember at the end of that training rotation, we were back at the company cleaning up gear, and the 18 Fox, the number 2 of his team, came across the hall and said to me, he says, "Well, why couldn't you have gotten here a week earlier? We'd have got you on our team instead of that guy." And I was like, "Oh my God, that dude is done. That captain, he has lost that team room. They will not follow that guy to chow hall." That always stuck with me. And within a week he was gone. They sent him off. He was the assistant battalion S4. Congratulations. That's like the worst job you could ever imagine. And it was all because he made excuses. He didn't hold himself accountable, and he wasn't physically fit. Non-negotiable. That's the expectation. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I would say also one last thing on officers. I think most likely because the dynamic in the regular Army is a little bit different than it is in a team room. Some guys show up and they think that they can't really like gel with the boys. They can't be like one of the boys. There's definitely a little bit of a fine line between being too much of one of the boys, and I don't really have a definition of one of the boys. Basically, shooting the shit, going out, having fun, doing things that are usually considered non-officer things, but just like you can absolutely be friends with guys on the team. I still have 2 of my former team captains that are really good friends to this day. One of them actually was my officiant for my wedding. He literally married my wife and I. So don't be afraid just because you're an officer and you're a little bit different and there's somewhat of a different dynamic between all the NCOs. Of course, you're definitely outmanned as far as personnel go on the team. It's just you. You might have a warrant with you, but also don't be afraid to get with the boys and do stuff outside the team room, or go do things that usually officers don't do instead of doing your admin stuff. Of course, you got to get the admin stuff done too, but don't spend all your time just kind of separated in this like weird little bubble. Because I've seen officers that do that, and I've seen officers that don't. I've also seen officers that are not officer enough and like too much of similar to an NCO, which can be a problem. But don't be afraid to like kind of be a bro once in a while.
Yeah, my company commander actually sat me down and had that talk with me. It was right before we were getting ready to deploy. It was my first deployment with the team, and he said to me, "There's a front." So let's just get this clear: officers are not better than NCOs. It's not more honorable. It's not more, there may be an element of prestige, but officers are not better than NCOs. They are different. We have a commissioning source, like literally the oath of commission is different than the oath of enlistment. They are different. They say different things. And if you don't have that basic understanding, then you need to do some research, because they are very different fiduciary responsibilities. And that's not a financial responsibility. That's a by credence responsibility. So I'm not better than my NCOs, but I am different in that I am in command. The detachment commander is in command. I have command responsibility. I have command authority, although that's sometimes a little wishy-washy on ODA. That normally rests with the company commander. But on a team, you're the officer. You have a role to play in that there may be a point in time where you have to order that guy on your team, your friend, your colleague, to do something very, very dangerous. Attack that hill, take that bunker, whatever it may be. So you always have to keep that in the back of your mind, in that you are in command of that team. So there has to be some separation of church and state, for lack of a better term. And my commander described it to me this way. He said, "You're going to go down range, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity where you're going to have your back against the wall with the boys, and you're going to be fighting off the locals, like literally in a physical bar, in a bar fight. The gringos against the host nation guys," and that held true. We definitely cleared a few bars. But you can never give up the moral high ground, because the moment you behave, to your point, unethically, immorally, or illegally, you lose that high ground. And you cannot, from that point on, you can't order that guy to take that hill, because you've lost that high ground. So while you will blow the froth off of many a cold one with the boys, you should definitely purchase more than your fair share of rounds. You cannot give up the moral high ground, because the expectation is that while you are one of the boys for this moment, you are not always one of the boys. And my team sergeant actually went so far as that except for on very specific low visibility clandestine missions, you were not allowed to use my first name. You like it was Sir, and my nickname was Cappy. Like it graded his insanely graded him that he allowed the boys to call me Cappy for captain, and like that for him was like that's as casual as we're getting around here. Like you're gonna treat the captain with respect, and captain, you're gonna behave respectfully. You know what I mean? So like it was very clear to me what those donations were. But I agree that you got to be one of the boys, because you're going to be living long term with these guys downrange. But you can't be fully one of the boys, and that's the burden of command. Like that's the reality of it, and you should welcome that, and you should also be willing to have that discussion with your team and explain to them, I am making these decisions this way for these reasons. If you can't articulate that to the boys, then you're probably not making good decisions. So I'd leave it at that.
Yeah,